Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya'i wal Mursaleen amma ba'd fa'a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim bismillahir rahmanir rahim salatu wassalamu alayka ya Rasulullah wa ala alika wa ashabika ya Habiballah as-salatu wassalamu alayka ya Nabiyallah wa ala alika wa ashabika ya Nurullah. Welcome back to our series Quranic stories. Inshallah, we're going to talk about someone very special, such a noble woman that it's the only woman that's mentioned by name in the Quran. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has actually named, the Quran has actually named an entire chapter after her. And not only that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the opening chapters of the Quran, Surah Ali Imran, this was the ancestors of this person, Hazrat Maryam, the noble woman, lady radiallahu anha. She was the mother of Isa al-Masih alayhi salam. She was the mother of this noble prophet, and she has a remarkable and a very special story. Her mother, she reached an old age and she hadn't child yet, and she sat outside and she seen in a tree that there was a bird, and the bird was feeding little chick, and she seen this affection between the mother and the child. And Hazrat Maryam radiallahu anha, her mother, she found in her heart the same affection that she wants a child as well. And she made a dua, she made a nazar, and she said that, oh Allah, if you give me a child, then I will sacrifice that child for the Masjidul Aqsa, for the vicinity of Al-Aqsa, Baytul Muqaddas. This child will therefore volunteer in looking after and being a part of the people of Al-Aqsa. Now, in that time, it was only men that would take part in this noble act of being waqf for the masjid. It was only men or boys in the aid of Masjid al-Aqsa, those people that would spend their time there, look after it, clean it, perform i'tikaf therein, worship therein, or even the imam and various other volunteers of Masjid al-Aqsa. There would mainly be men. So the mother of Maryam radiallahu anha, she had in her heart that I want a child, and if I get that child, then I will sacrifice that child and allow that child to serve Masjid al-Aqsa. When she was due and she gave birth to a woman, and she was confused because now what happens? Because normally a man or a boy would be serving Masjid al-Aqsa, but in this case, she's given birth to a female, serves Masjid al-Aqsa. So in this confusion, and she mentions this, she says,
رَبِّ إِنِّي وَضَعْتُهَا أُنْثَى. O my Lord, I have given birth to a girl.
What happens now? How do I fulfill my promise? They end up allowing Maryam, who was the daughter of the woman we have been talking about. So Hazrat Zakaria alayhi salam, he was the imam of the masjid as well, and he was a prophet, and he was from the same lineage, and they make a way for her to be able to serve the masjid. So they make her a separate section, and that was what we call the mihrab of Maryam. A portion of Masjid al-Aqsa was given to her where she would reside therein, and she would stay there, and no one else was allowed there. That was her place of worship, and that was her form of serving Masjid al-Aqsa. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, therefore, even though the norm was that only men serve the masjid, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions in the verse of the Quran,
فَتَقَبَّلَهَا رَبُّهَا بِقَبُولٍ حَسَنٍ وَأَنبَتَهَا نَبَاتًا حَسَنًا وَكَفَّلَهَا زَكَرِيَّا
كلما دخل عليها زكريا المحراب وجد عندها رزقا قال يا مريم أنى لك هذا.
So her Lord accepted her, i.e., Maryam, well, and he raised her in an excellent manner and gave her under the guardianship of Zachariah. When Zachariah visited her at her prayer chamber, he would find new sustenance, i.e., non-seasonal fruits with her. He asked, "O Maryam, from where did this come to you?"
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted her with a magnificent acceptance, and he accepted her completely to serve the masjid. And this was remarkable. That shows the status and the nobility of this woman. She would serve in the masjid and she would stay therein and she would worship God. So Zakaria took this responsibility to be the kafil of Hazrat Maryam radiallahu anha, and he would find numerous provisions. And once he says, where does this come from? Who gives you this sustenance?
قالت هو من عند الله إن الله يرزق من يشاء بغير حساب.
She answered, "That is from Allah. Indeed, Allah gives to whom He wills without measure."
So this was something remarkable. So she would get fruits and foods of the summer in the winter, which were basically off season, and she would get foods and fruits in the winter that were of the summer, growths of the summer. And this was very mysterious. How can she have access to all these goods, all this provision, when the rest of the vicinity doesn't have access to this, and she is locked away in this room? She is off-sectioned into this room, and no one else is allowed in there other than a few selected people. Zakaria alayhi salam realized that this woman is a noble woman. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen her, selected her, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says this in the Quran.
يا مريم إن الله اصطفاك وطهرك واصطفاك على نساء العالمين.
O Maryam, Allah has indeed chosen you and purified you well, and today, i.e., in your era, exalted you above all the women of the world.
O Maryam, indeed Allah has chosen you, Allah has selected you. He has purified you completely from menstruations, from any inner diseases, spiritual diseases. He has purified you in the sense that a non-mahram man will never be in closer proximity to you. And likewise, He has chosen you above all the women of the world. And at that time, in the year she was living in the era she was living in, she was of the most noble status woman. There was no one that had more. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about an amazing incident that takes place in the Quran. And she was in her chamber worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when suddenly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says,
فأرسلنا إليها روحنا فتمثل لها بشرا سويا.
We henceforth sent our spiritual one, i.e., Jibreel, towards her. He appeared before her in the form of a healthy man.
So Jibreel alayhi salam, he came in the form of a man in front of Maryam radiallahu anha, and she says straight away the first thing, her reaction was,
قالت إني أعوذ بالرحمن منك إن كنت تقيا.
She said, "I seek a refuge of the Most Gracious from you if you fear Allah."
This was her reaction straight away. And Jibreel alayhi salam says,
قال إنما أنا رسول ربك لأهب لك غلاما زكيا.
He said, "I have been sent by your Lord so that I may give you a pure son."
and the word used here, what Jibreel alayhi salam says, La ahaba laki, I'm going to give you that child. So now the true one who gives life to someone is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Jibreel alayhi salam knows that. But despite that, he says that I'm going to give you that child. So this happens sometimes in the Quran, in Hadith, even though the ultimate bestower of something is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this terminology is used, it's a valid use of terminology. And this is what Jibreel alayhi salam demonstrated here as well.
قالت أنى يكون لي غلام ولم يمسسني بشر ولم أك بغيا.
She said, how can I bear a son? No man has touched me, nor am I unchaste.
قال كذلك قال ربك هو علي هين ولنجعله آية للناس ورحمة منا وكان أمرا مقضيا.
He said, it is only as so. Your Lord has declared that this is easy for me, and in order that we make him a sign for the people and appoint him as a mercy from us, and this matter has been decreed by Allah.
So she ended up giving birth. So what Jibreel alayhi salam done? Jibreel alayhi salam blew onto her chest, and straight away she felt the growth of a child inside her. It was instant. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the ability to do that. He created Adam without a father, he could create Isa alayhi salam without a father.
فحملته فانتبذت به مكانا قصيا.
Now Maryam conceived him, and she went away with him to a faraway place.
So she conceived him, and then she went to a remote location.
فأجاءها المخاض إلى جذع النخلة.
The pain of labor then brought her to the trunk of the date tree.
The pains that she was suffering, the pains of labor, the Quran says that these pains drove her to a place which was like a hill, and there was a tree on that. And she went and took shade and rested in that tree, in the shade of that tree. Remote locations, so no one else is there. And she feared, because her family was of nobility, she was of a noble character, she didn't get married. She feared that people would accuse her of doing something indecent. And not only would that be wrong, not only would that cause her emotional damage, it would not only is that a false accusation, but it would also damage her reputation and the reputation of her family, her lineage. Zakaria alayhi salam, and then the serving of Masjid al-Aqsa, her parents, this was for an individual, they would only see what people have to say about this. She says that,
يا ليتني مت قبل هذا وكنت نسيا منسيا.
She said, oh, I wish I had died before this and had become someone totally forgotten.
she says that, had only of death come before this occasion. Yani, well, this is a term, this is a phrase used, it would be better than to suffer this embarrassment that people will falsely accuse me of doing something that I haven't done, because then I'm going to understand that Jibreel alayhi salam came to me and gave me a child, and you can't put it past a person. They wouldn't understand that. That's not normal. And the only thing people resort to is causing false accusations. She says, had I have only departed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prior to this, I wouldn't have gone through this false accusation period.
فناداها من تحتها ألا تحزني قد جعل ربك تحتك سريا.
The angel therefore called her from underneath the date tree, that do not grieve. Undoubtedly, your Lord has made a stream flow below you.
Jibreel alayhi salam calls to her and says, don't grieve. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made for you a small stream gush out of this hill. He commands her,
وهزي إليك بجذع النخلة النخلة تساقط عليك رطبا جنيا.
And grab the trunk of the date tree and shake it towards you. Fresh ripe dates will fall upon you.
The scholars mention here that the pangs of labor are so powerful and so extreme, and the hormones released in a body of a woman at that point are so powerful that they have enough power to shake a tree. A trunk of a tree is a strong structure. And to shake a palm tree with such strength that the dates fall, that's amazing strength. So the scholars say, and they give this analogy that the pangs of labor are that powerful.
فكلي واشربي وقري عينا فإما ترين من البشر أحدا فقولي إني نذرت للرحمن صوما فلن أكلم اليوم إنسيا.
So eat and drink and keep your eyes cool. If you then see any person, so say with signs, I have pledged a fast of silence for the most gracious. I will therefore not speak to any person today.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, then eat and drink and cool your eyes. If you see someone from the people, then say that I am fasting. I'm not going to speak to anyone today.
فأتت به قومها تحمله قالوا يا مريم لقد جئت شيئا فريا.
So carrying him in her arm, she brought him to her people. They said, O Maryam, you have indeed done something very strange.
And then she went back to her nation. She went back to her people. And they turned around. And not even coincidentally, but it was something that was understood. They said, you have done something. You've committed a vile act. You've done such a horrible thing.
يا أخت هارون ما كان أبوك امرأ سوء وما كانت أمك بغيا.
O sister of Harun, your father was not an evil man, nor was your mother an unchaste woman.
They, oh, sister of Harun, yani, the scholars differ here. They say either she had a brother called Harun, or this was actually Harun alayhi salam who was in her ancestry. O sister of Harun, your father was a good person. He was not an evil person, and neither was your mother a vile, immoral person. Now she basically kept this fast of talking, and she pointed towards her child, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this child is going to speak to the people.
فأشارت إليه قالوا كيف نكلم من كان في المهد صبيا.
Thereupon she pointed towards the child. They said, how can we speak to an infant who is in the cradle?
She pointed towards the child, and they turned around and said that how are we supposed to talk to a child who is still in his cradle? How are we supposed to talk to a child?
قال إني عبد الله آتاني الكتاب وجعلني نبيا.
The child Isa said, I am Allah's bondsman. He has given me the book and made me a conveyor of the unseen news, i.e., a prophet.
Isa alayhi salam began to speak on the first day upon birth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted, he was a prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted him this vast power, strength, that he was able to speak. Inni Abdullah, I am the servant of God. Atani al-kitaba wa ja'alani nabiyya. He gave me the book and he has made me a prophet.
وجعلني مباركا أينما كنت وأوصاني بالصلاة والزكاة ما دمت حيا.
And he has made me blessed wherever I may be, and ordained upon me salah and zakah for as long as I live.
So wherever Isa alayhi salam is a place of blessing.
وبرا بوالدتي ولم يجعلني جبارا شقيا.
And he has made me dutiful to my mother and has not made me hostile, unfortunate.
والسلام علي يوم ولدت ويوم أموت ويوم أبعث حيا.
And that very peace be upon me the day I was born, and on the day I shall pass away, and on the day I will be raised alive.
ذلك عيسى بن مريم قول الحق الذي فيه يمترون.
This is Isa, the son of Maryam, a statement of truth in which they, the Christians, doubt.
So this was the verses regarding Isa alayhi salam's birth, how Maryam radiallahu anha gave birth to Isa alayhi salam. The certain, just briefly, the affairs that took place upon his birth, the trials Maryam radiallahu anha went through. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us understanding. May He forgive us for their sake. Ameen bijahi Nabil Ameen. Sallu ala al-Habib sallallahu ala Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.